Now, right, so if we have past, present, and future, most of what we know from the past, most of the things from the past are okay now, and 99% of the time, they're going to be okay in the future. Right? In other words, 99% past, present, future is going to be some kind of a linear progression. And I use the example of Hello Kitty. Okay. Hello Kitty's really popular before, and it's really popular now, and it's probably going to be really, really popular tomorrow. Okay. So all of your past knowledge about Hello Kitty supply, how many Hello Kitty supplies to make, how many things to order, how many to ship out to the markets for tomorrow's sale, probably all okay. Probably based on the past, it's going to be okay. But what if tomorrow or tonight a news story goes across all the world about a new disease in cats? And if the cat licks you or bites you or scratches you, you're going to die. Okay? What's going to happen to Hello Kitty sales tomorrow? Okay, they're going to go down. This is called a black swan event. You know why? You know, swans are mostly white, big birds with long necks, you know, and a black swan is really, really rare. So we call a black swan event when something happens and everything changes immediately, like the financial crisis. It really happened, right? A few years ago, one company had trouble paying their bills, and the whole banking system all over the world is finished. How many businesses went out of business at that moment? So, although most of the future seems predictable, in fact, all these things exist. The future, genuinely, the future is not predictable. It seems predictable, but it's not predictable. Okay? So I've been teaching you, I've been telling you about information management you're learning, and knowledge management I'm telling you about. What if all the information and knowledge in all of your computer systems is suddenly no good, not useful for you? What if all your experience from your past is suddenly not going to help you at that moment? What's going to happen then? What are you going to do? So, my PhD student right now, and this gets a little tricky, now we're working on the idea, I almost hate to say it. You know what wisdom is? Wisdom in Chinese is what, Zhigui? If you go back to the data, oops, terrible writing, info, knowledge, and wisdom. This is a traditional hierarchy that you sometimes see in the information system literature. So now we're kind of looking at wisdom. I don't believe that, by the way, but now we're looking at wisdom. If knowledge and information is not enough for those situations, maybe what you need is wisdom. And this is what my student is looking at, and what I think I'm also looking at. I think it's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Really, the question becomes. How do you try to understand the future? Can you understand the future? Yeah, it's really hard to understand the future, okay, to know what's going to happen. But there are techniques, Okay. Management has something called scenario planning. You know what scenario planning is? That's where people get around the table and they say, what if cats start killing people tomorrow? What are we going to do about our Hello Kitty? Or what if the banks collapse tomorrow? What are we going to do about our investments? That's called scenario planning. And what if a big disease like SARS kills 50 million people? What are we going to do about our product, our company? So that's called scenario planning. So you actually think about the future. So that's one way of thinking about the future. The other way is maybe through sense making. Sense making is where you look at, not only do you look at the past, but you look at all the things happening now. And you see if you cannot try and put the dots together and see that these things seem to be happening. Maybe it's going to go like this in the future, or maybe it's going to go like that, or maybe it's going to go like that. In other words, if you think carefully and you look around carefully and you reflect carefully on what's happening and you talk to many different people and you do research, then maybe you can get an idea about what might happen in the future, what you might need to do at this moment when those things start. Maybe. So there may be some ways of gaining those skills. There may be some things that you can do to gain some of those skills. You cannot know the future for sure, but you can maybe understand likelihoods, where things might be going. And if something happens, maybe not be too surprised. So these are a couple of those ideas, but here is maybe a little more specific. I just finished co-editing a book on practical wisdom, and we just sent it to the publisher. It'll come out next year, early next year. So we're looking at practical wisdom, and my student also looking at practical wisdom. And we're looking at it from management point of view. And I think any field, information system, doesn't really matter. This kind of understanding could be very important. Okay, wise leaders know the art of management. They have a lot of experience. They're creative. They are ethical. Ethics is really, really important in wisdom. Ethics is doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. Okay? Doing what is good. Okay, and they have empathy. You know what empathy is? Empathy is understanding the other person's point of view. So wise leaders have these things. They learn and they reflexively question assumptions. You know what an assumption is? All right. You'll never forget when I'm finished explaining. An assumption is when you believe something to be true. You don't have the facts, but you just believe it to be true. When I was about your age, I was working in a store, and I was the guy who ordered something and brought it in and put it on the shelf. And my boss, I didn't do something right. And I said to my boss, I assumed something was going to happen, so this wouldn't be a problem. I assumed everything would be all right. But he wrote down on a piece of paper, he said, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. and 35 years later, I still remember. Okay, why does that here? Because when a leader, a wise leader, hears something, they don't assume anything. They don't assume it's correct. They think about it. So when the guy comes and says, we ordered 10,000 Hello Kitty boxes because it's going to be really good sales tomorrow or next week, the wise leader says, well, how do you know that for for sure? How can we really know Hello Kitty is going to be selling? I mean, probably, but how do we know for sure? So wise leaders are always thinking about those assumptions. They're always engaged in genuine conversations with stakeholders, all stakeholders. Okay, this is a great example. You know, in Taiwan, when they want to build a big chemical factory or a nuclear power plant, what happens? What always happens? People end up holding signs and just like in China. Amazing, right? Because the chemical company or the nuclear power plant or the government, maybe they had a few conversations with a few people in the community. And they gave a little bit of money to the village chief, and the village chief says, no problem, I'll take care of my people. Everything will be great. And then what happens? When the plans go public, they didn't really have genuine conversations with all the people. And stakeholders are not just, from a wisdom point of view, stakeholders include the community and the wider community and the environment and everybody who's involved or affected. Okay, so wise leaders do that. Command and control is like army, top down. Top down. The president says do this, do that, do this, do this. Okay. Wise leaders are not so concerned with controlling because they know the world is complex and they know sometimes the best answers will come from below. Okay. So they don't need to get all their answers from their top people. They can sometimes go and get answers from below. This is a little tricky. Wise leaders are developing their judgment and insight. Let's just leave that. These are kinds of skills, but I don't know exactly how you develop them. We'll come back to that. And they can integrate. This is really saying they can integrate gut feeling, intuition, with their thinking, rational mind. Okay? So wise leaders are not just thinking A equals B, B equals C, A equals C. They're thinking, yeah, but something tells me this is not quite right. So they trust their intuition. So in management schools, they're always telling you have to be logical, you have to be rational. But actually, through history, we also make a lot of decisions from our gut, from our intuition, from our feelings. So wise leaders consider both before making decisions. Okay. Any questions on that? I'm bringing this up because it continues from knowledge management. Okay, it's where I'm going and where my students go. So I'm going to show you one thing that my student and I came up with. Just to show you where research goes. Okay? You guys are going to be doing research projects, master's thesis. Do they have to do a thesis?
Yes. Okay, I'm about to start to find
topics. Yeah. This is kind of complicated, but let me just tell you. My student, based on the literature, just on reading journals and books about wisdom, came up with a model, his own theory actually, a theory, of how to learn, or what is necessary to learn wisdom. And we're wondering, can we do it in a management school? Can we teach wisdom? So he came up with 3 levels. Now, although they go up, they're actually all happening at the same time. Collecting, the level of collecting data, collecting information, collecting knowledge. That's all the past information, knowledge that we talked about. Okay. We talked about cognition in the beginning. Thinking about it. So taking this and thinking about it. Knowing that sometimes what you know is wrong, that's fallibility. So knowledge can be wrong. Applying insight and intuition, just what we talked about. Reflecting, thinking about this. So this is understanding, thinking. Okay. And then how does this connect with the larger community? Is it ethical? We sometimes include emotion. Judgment, how do we judge this? This is decision making. That's connecting. So connecting this to the larger community, and then